Good morning. This is Writers Not Writing Podcast, your weekly book podcast filled with amazing writers taking a break from the craft to talk about the one thing they love. This is our third episode. We are recording the week of 11th of February. I am Pirrip, and today I'll be talking about writing with music as well as interviewing debut author Yawatta Hosby. Today I wanted to talk about writing with music. It seems as very simple. It seems as if it's not really a big issue, but I find the issue very interesting because I hear a lot of different answers from a lot of different people. Some established authors say that they can't write with music because the music to them is very distracting, while some others say they can write with music and they find it very pleasant and very helpful in the writing process. For instance, I believe Stephen King says he writes with like rock and roll music or rock music, and he writes with rock music playing, and that really helps him get into the mood of his characters. And I myself, I usually listen to very experimental music when I'm writing. So think of the likes of like Bjork and Arca because I really like those atmospheric type of music because it doesn't the lyrics don't allow me to get distracted instead of focusing on that process of actually writing. And I find this very interesting because I didn't know that this was such a very distinct, very battleground set of rules of if people can actually write with music or not. And I found some people who are against it, and they like are really against it, and they really do a really good job of actually being very angry about this and fighting back. They say that writing with the music actually makes them very distracting, and I don't know how they find that so because I don't really see or find writing with music to be that distracting. For me, it puts me in a very good place to get me out of the atmosphere around me. For instance, for the most part, I usually write inside of coffee shops or public places and things of that nature. So it's really hard for me to actually concentrate and hear the voices of my characters when I'm surrounded by people who are constantly talking. That makes it hard for me to concentrate on the characters that I'm trying to write for because I'm already constantly listening for other stories and other dialogues around me. Putting the music on that allows me to actually focus in and hone in on actually my characters. While other people don't feel like that, feel this way, they feel as if the writing will detach them in out of the experience of actually writing. And I have seen this. I have actually noticed this happen with my own writing, where I'll be writing, for instance, poetry, and then I will play some like music that's very moody and very atmospheric, chopped up and just kind of out there, and that ends up reflecting into my poetry. And I usually don't tend to listen to music when I write poetry for this reason because I stop writing the actual my own feelings and I start reflecting the feelings that I'm listening to, which I find very weird. But I don't find this problem writing fiction or stage plays or screenplays. I actually find that writing with the music on actually helps me tackle and get through these problems. I find a lot of authors are very against and very adamantly against writing with music, and that music you will end up reflecting what you are listening to, you're reflecting those emotions. But I don't find that so. I feel like with every different writer it varies, in that we shouldn't be pushing down people's throats that there's one approach to writing, and that we shouldn't allow ourselves to write without music, because I feel like writing with music is very helpful. But this also moves into, do we read with music? I find a lot of people say they can't read with music. I find a lot of teachers say that reading with music is actually very bad as it messes with your memory of the information that you have been reading. But I find myself always listening to music when I read books, and I am able to recall majority of the stuff that happens in them quite easily. And I don't know, I find it very hard to concentrate on certain books if I'm not listening to music. And I guess it always depends on the type of music you listen to, because when I'm walking down the street or even I'm in my car, I'm blasting completely different music than I am listening to when I'm actually sitting down and focusing on reading or writing. I'm not listening to the same genre of music. And maybe we could even break it down even further and say that some of these genres are different. These differing genres can actually affect the way we write and the quality that we write. And the genre that people listen to while writing and reading, it's completely different usually than what they are listening to normally throughout the day. And I find that very interesting. For instance, I see a lot of people that are listening to epic movie soundtracks, which is kind of weird. So think of the sorts of like the Star Wars soundtrack, the Harry Potter series, and Lord of the Rings. So these very um, full of momentum and full of excitement and suspense in them to actually build the momentum that will be needed to write these very cool stories. And other people actually listening to like atmospheric music in the sorts that I listen to, or just very slow, chill music that doesn't really have a lot of lyrics to it because of they could find them distracting, and I find that very interesting. For instance, what if we see someone listening to very loud metal music? Does that inhibit them from writing? I find this very look into what people listen to while writing to be very interesting. I guess what I'm trying to dig. I guess what I'm trying to dig into is, can we write a very sad book while listening to death metal music? Is that possible? Do the emotions of the music that we are listening to kind of invoke and change the writing in which we are writing? I find that very interesting, and I'll look into that. And I would love to hear what your thoughts and opinions on if you're able to write and read while listening to music. I would love to hear your own thoughts and opinions on it. So go ahead and comment on Twitter at Pirrip and tell me if you are able to write or read while listening to music. All right, and next up, I have Yawatta Hosby here to talk about her newest novel, One by One, as well as her other three short stories that she has currently on Amazon. So, what made you want to be an author?
Well, I took creative writing classes in the seventh and 12th grade, and both of my teachers were very encouraging. And they asked me to please try to be a writer because they said my work was really good. And after I got feedback from other people and saw that they were really telling the truth and weren't just trying to be nice to the little kid, I decided to go ahead and pursue writing as a full time job in my 30s when I didn't really have a career.
All right, and a lot of your stories are actually about kind of like the psychology vein of writing. So, where did that come about?
Well, in college, my favorite subject was psychology. I have a very fascination with people, why they do the things they do, why some people are crazy and some people are normal. And I love just like research and stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring fear into my readers because I'm actually scared of crazy people. So that's why I like to write it. I was actually stalked in my college years. So I kind of know what it feels like for someone to be obsessed with you, even though you don't want that. So that's why I keep writing it, probably. It's probably therapeutic to me.
So, are there any more like life experiences like has like affected your writing?
I think just the aspect of just being scared of like the crazy people. I think eventually I probably want to start having some of my monsters be not just humans, but actually like the boogeyman or Loch Ness monster, stuff like that. Because I do actually believe in that stuff too, even if it probably isn't true. I just believe stuff is out there.
So, do you base your these stories on like actual real crimes that happen around you, or just pulling straight from like life experiences?
Well, sometimes I take newspaper clippings like for my short stories, and I'll be inspired to write a story from that. And I sometimes I take a like a scene from a movie that I really liked and I switch that up and say, well, what if this happened, or what if these certain characters were in that situation? So I always find inspiration from either like a TV show, a movie, or newspaper clippings. I do like to think of stuff that could really happen. So my stories are always based on like the real world. I've never done any fantasy or anything like that.
What's one story that like really like grabs your attention like of like recently?
Um, you mean like of
Like
a
a
real life crime?
yeah.
Well, I read a article the other day. Actually really saddened me. There was this girl that was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, and she went to the cops and like told on him because he had put a tracker on their car, and she even showed them text messages of him threatening to kill her and her mom. And unfortunately, the cops didn't do anything about it at all, and the ex did actually end up killing the woman and the mom in her house. And I felt very bad about that because I just didn't understand why the cops couldn't help her when she had evidence that she was being stalked. So I'll probably turn something like that into a short story and like change things up.
And so your newest novel is actually a follow up to your previous novel, One by One. And this one being 6 plus 1. There's like almost a 4 year gap in between the works. What happened between those years?
Well, actually, to be honest, when I wrote One by One back in 2013, I never really expected it to have a sequel. But my friend, she's also my coworker, she challenged me to write a story where a coworker ended up killing all of her coworkers. So I was like, okay. So I had to try to think of something that would happen, and I was like, well, before I wrote a story one by one where that happened. So I was like, maybe I can try to do that again. And instead of a group of friends going to the woods to hang out, I can have a like a web series crew go to the woods, and instead of being able to film their film footage, they're actually being stalked by a killer. So that's how 6 plus 1 came. It was kind of actually just a fluke that One by One became a sequel, but I'm pretty happy with it, and I think it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. Did you learn anything about your own writing style in between the years?
Yes, I actually realized that I actually love dialogue way more than what I used to probably in the past, because usually my beta readers and my critique partners, they usually have to tell me that, hey, you have a lot of dialogue here, but you have to put some emotion into your scenes, and you probably should describe stuff more like the setting where you're at. So sometimes I do think that maybe instead of being just a fiction writer, maybe I should also be like a short film screenwriter or something like that, since I do love the dialogue a lot and the plot.
Is there like any possibility that we could see one of these like previous published works turned into like a short film or anything?
Actually, I've been thinking about it because I do write short films, and I'm actually turning my short story "Plenty of Fish," which was about a local painter getting stalked by someone when she's working on her painting. Actually, I'm trying to write that. It's just I really don't know any actors or how to get started onto having that filmed. But I'm trying to work on that, actually trying to meet up with local actors who work in the theaters and see if they'd be interested in doing it for free or something like that.
All
So
right,
I'm working on it, and hopefully I can do that by 2018 or 2019.
yeah, all right, that sounds really cool. So, are there like any scenes that didn't make it into the 6 plus 1?
Yes, actually it had an alternate ending, and I sent it out to a beta reader, and they thought that it was kind of slowing down the action. So I decided to take it out and just leave the ending as it was, kind of like a open-ended ending. And maybe one day I'll send that bonus piece to my newsletter subscribers so they can see how 6 plus 1 could have maybe possibly ended.
All right, that's really cool. So do you have like a current like favorite book currently, or any book that you would like to recommend?
Yes, I really love The Ruins by Scott Smith. It actually was a film, I think, back in, it was either 2008 or 2006. I really love that author's style because it was a bunch of kids. They went to New Mexico or Mexico on a trip, but then they get trapped on this piece of land because they can't leave because of the urban legend surrounding that. And I think Scott Smith did a wonderful job of showing how creepy those plants were and how the kids were being psychologically tortured by being trapped on that piece of land and couldn't leave. I really loved the book.
Do you think it will have like any effects on your own writing?
Yes, I think so because the story's really good because it had like a slow build up and you got to really know all the characters and see how they're all getting along. And you're just dreading the moment because you know, oh my goodness, something bad is going to happen. So when all the action starts with like how they're trapped on that piece of land and can't leave, you really feel bad for them. And then those plants start torturing them. I thought the writer did a really good job, and I think it would be fun to write something like that. It kind of reminded me of my writing style, actually, how I do this slow build up, and then eventually everything just goes crazy all at once.
And do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
Yes, for all the aspiring writers out there, they should always carry a notebook with them wherever they go. That way, whenever you have a story idea, you can just jot it down instead of having to wait till you get home to like your laptop or your tablet. And I think people always say that writers should write every day, but I don't necessarily believe in that because it puts too much pressure if you just can't think of anything to write. So I think aspiring writers should take the time to write when they feel like it and when they're inspired instead of thinking that it has to be a chore that you have to write every day. Just have fun with it. Know that your first draft can be crappy because you can edit later and just write because you like to write and not because you feel like you're forced to.
Do you currently write every day, or do you like write when you want to?
Well, I joined the 10-minute novelist on Facebook and they kind of helped me write at least 15 minutes a day. But I do write mostly on the weekends. I can write for like 5 hours Saturday and Sunday. So I do try to, I kind of take a break sometimes on the weekdays and mostly focus on the weekends because after I come home from work, sometimes I'm tired and just want to relax. But I do try to get at least that 15 minutes in if I can, but it's not a big deal if I can't.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. Thank you for actually joining us today. All right, and you can find all of Hosby's books on Amazon. I will leave a link to it on my blog. Thank you for joining us.
And thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for listening to Writers Not Writing podcast. You can get all of the links and information mentioned in this episode at campirp.com/writers not writing. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday, the 21st, to see and listen to our next episode. Keep your heads up high and expectations great.